Today's episode is supported by Chainalysis, the blockchain data platform transforming the way financial institutions, government, and crypto businesses trace digital assets. With advanced tools for compliance and investigations, Chainalysis helps you stay ahead in the fight against financial crime. Designated is proudly supported by Hummingbird. Hummingbird is a modern compliance platform designed to make financial crime investigations smarter, faster, and more effective. Because today's financial criminals are sophisticated, savvy, and agile, meaning the tools used to fight them should be too. Learn more at hummingbird.co.
Tigran was seriously one of the best special agents that we had at IRS-CI. Tigran is a hostage. He did nothing wrong. He is sitting in a prison for a crime that he did not commit. The U.S. government needs to step up and step up now.
I'm Yaya Jata Fanusie, and this is Designated from the Illicit Edge Network. This is part 2 of our look into the cause of Tigran Gambaryan, the former IRS criminal investigator who has been detained in Nigeria for over 7 months now. He served his country as one of the best investigators of illicit finance involving cryptocurrencies when Bitcoin was first emerging as a tool for cybercriminals. He was so good at his job that the world's largest crypto exchange, Binance, recruited him to help the company clean up its act after years of allowing illicit activity on its platform. His detention on trumped-up charges in February shocked many of us in the world of anti-money laundering compliance. Because if it could happen to Tigran, who was just doing his job, it could happen to any of us. In part 1, we spoke to his wife Yuki, Congressman Rich McCormick, and Wired senior writer Andy Greenberg. In this episode, you'll hear from some of those who've worked with him side by side, friends and colleagues who are devastated by his situation and are trying to bring him home. We'll start with Richard Weber, who was the former chief of the Internal Revenue Service's Criminal Investigations Division, better known as IRS-CI. He supervised thousands of financial crime investigators around the country, including Tigran Gambaryan, one of his finest agents. He explains what many people don't know about IRS-CI and tells how Tigran so positively impacted the organization. So, time to get designated and hear the behind-the-scenes story so we can figure out what needs to happen to bring Tigran home. What is IRS-CI and how does it fit in the world of fighting financial crime?
So IRS-CI is an amazing law enforcement organization. The agency has been around for 105 years. It is the only law enforcement agency that has the authority to work tax crime cases, but the agency has historically been able to investigate some of the most important and complex financial crime cases that's out there. It has an incredibly long and storied history and some of the best financial investigative agents in the world.
And so I'm assuming most people may be unaware of the IRS having a criminal investigations unit or division. Um, what would most people be surprised about when it comes to IRS-CI?
Well, I think there are a lot of things that people would be surprised about. First of all, it is true that many folks in the public don't realize that the Treasury Department has a law enforcement agency within IRS, about 4,000 employees, 2,500 special agents that are in 25 field offices across the country. They have foreign attache posts in about 12 countries. And it's an agency that really focuses on the complex financial crimes cases. What I think the public also wouldn't understand is some of the historic cases that have been around for so many years. When people think about IRS, sometimes they do think about the Al Capone case as the only law enforcement agency that was able to get Capone when no other law enforcement agency was able to do so. We were also involved many years ago in the Charles Lindbergh baby kidnapping case, and most people aren't aware of that. It was actually the IRS-CI chief and a few agents that came up with the idea of marking the treasury bills and recording them, and that was ultimately the way that law enforcement was able to catch the defendant and prosecute him. And it's something that I don't think most people realize. Also, back during the Iraq War, IRS-CI sent about 10 agents into that war zone to focus on asset seizures. And we were able to work with other law enforcement agencies, but really spearhead that effort to capture and to bring back tens of millions of dollars. Actually, I think it was in the $1 billion range, and also give back to the Iraqi people. So there was a lot of effort done behind the scenes in a lot of our cases that the public doesn't realize kind of the significance of the agency.
And so, what was your role at IRS-CI?
So I grew up as a prosecutor. I served as a prosecutor at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District for over 10 years. I was chief of the money laundering section in Washington for about 5 years. Went to the Manhattan DA's office, and then I got a call about the position of chief of IRS-CI, which quite frankly was a dream job for me to lead the best financial investigative agency in the world. And being a prosecutor and working with those agents, I had a real deep respect for the agents and the work that they were doing in every field office across the country. So when I got the call and the opportunity to put my hat in the ring, I jumped at it and ultimately was successful in getting the position moving back down to Washington, and for 5.5 years had the real sincere honor and privilege to be chief and to be leader and be responsible for such a great organization with so many dedicated special agents and employees.
Richard, how did you get to know Tigran?
So Tigran was seriously one of the best special agents that we had at IRS-CI when I was chief. As I mentioned, we had 2,500 or so special agents across the country. I spent a lot of my time traveling to every field office in every state, in every location, and I met many agents in the 5.5 years that I served as chief. I knew a lot of agents. They often presented cases. I had town halls at every field office 3 times a month. But I didn't know the names of every agent, and I didn't know every agent personally. And I knew Tigran, and I knew him pretty early on in my career because he was truly one of the best cyber and crypto agents that we had in the entire agency. Prosecutors sought him out for their cases. Supervisors loved assigning him work. He was a dogged investigator who really knew crypto more than anyone in the agency at that time. He knew crypto when at a time when no one knew what crypto even was. He was investigating cases. He was teaching and training other agents, and he was a real force in the agency when I was there and after I left.
Can you share some of the cases that he worked on?
Sure. So Tegan, first of all, was assigned to a task force that focused on national security, terrorist financing issues. He was also a founding member of the digital currency, digital asset task force. Tigran really believed in the concept of working in a cooperative way with other agencies and other partners. He was the type of agent that would roll up his sleeves and do all the work that he needed to do for that particular investigation, but he had no problem working with other agents and other countries on their cases and on their investigations. When he was an agent focusing in the cyber and crypto area, he was behind the scenes working the Silk Road case, which was one of the biggest takedowns of a dark net company doing incredibly bad things. They were involved in every single criminal enterprise that you can think of. And Tigran was behind the scenes working that case day after day until that case was ultimately taken down. Tigran was also heavily involved in the Mt. Gox case, which devastated the digital asset community and the crypto industry at the time. And it involved a Russian enterprise that was involved in so many different forms of criminal activity. And those two cases are just two of the many that he worked, but it really showed his ability to work these incredibly complicated cases cross jurisdictionally with other agencies, multinational, international cases that really reached around the globe.
Hmm. Is there one thing that you could point to that he did that set him apart?
So Tigran honestly was one of the hardest working agents that I've ever worked with. I think one of the things that I would always remember about Tigran's work was just his unbelievable knowledge of the area. It's not often where you find an agent that has incredible investigative skills, but also substantive knowledge about the particular area that they're investigating. And his deep background and experience in crypto and blockchain technology, and his ability to really, go through some complicated and detailed fact patterns is just something I think that really set him apart. His drive, his tenacity, his dogged efforts to really track down every piece and puzzle of the case. Nothing was ever left behind, and he was incredibly sought after by other agencies and prosecutors.
How did you learn about Tigran's arrest, and what went through your mind when you found out about it?
So I was actually contacted by an agent at IRS. I still keep in touch with many current IRS-CI special agents and retired special agents. And one of the agents that works in the organization had contacted me to tell me what was going on. I also have a connection to Binance's current chief compliance officer, Noah Perlman, who I worked with personally at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District. He was a prosecutor with me, and I've known Noah for probably about 20 years. Noah is by far one of the best compliance professionals with the utmost integrity in the industry. So I had also spoken to Noah about the situation, and completely shocked that someone like Tigran could be arrested or even detained in Nigeria or in any foreign country or anywhere in the world for any potential criminal wrongdoing. I knew without even looking at any of the facts, which I looked at very carefully after that, but I knew at that very moment that Tigran did absolutely nothing wrong, and it was the Nigerian government that was trying to get something out of his detainment.
So, how has the law enforcement community responded?
So it's really interesting. The law enforcement community, in my view, both as a former prosecutor and former chief of the agency, has always been a really close knit, family, and especially within IRS-CI. I was always amazed how thousands of employees could really get behind the mission and really care about the work and about each other. And I have been in contact with probably hundreds of people. I've been posting on LinkedIn repeatedly about what's going on with Tigran and had received literally thousands and thousands of messages about this. Former prosecutors and government officials signed a letter that went to the State Department, to Secretary Blinken. I think that was signed by over 100 former prosecutors and agents. There are so many people within this community that care so much about the issue and about bringing Tigran home.
What do you think the US government needs to do more of in order to address Tigran's situation?
So Tigran, without a doubt, is being held captive in a Nigerian prison. The prison that he is being held at is a prison that also holds the worst of the worst criminals in Nigeria. It's a prison that holds really bad people, including terrorists. And here we have a former law enforcement official, a dedicated public servant who is working at a crypto company as a mid level employee, not a decision maker, not an executive, who is trying to resolve a compliance issue, who then gets arrested and thrown into the same facility. And the US government should do everything in their power to get him out and bring him home to his wife, Yuki, and his two young children. They need to, and they have the authority to do this under the Levinson Act, they need to characterize him as a US citizen wrongfully detained. Tigran is a hostage. He did nothing wrong. He is sitting in a prison for a crime that he did not commit. He's been in prison for over 200 days, almost 8 months, and no one knows what he really did wrong. I don't even think the Nigerian government know what he did wrong, yet they're holding him. So the government in the US needs to put additional pressure on Nigeria, an ally, right? They're an ally country, and they need to really focus on getting him back to his family. The US sends to Nigeria $1.2 billion approximately a year in aid. There are a lot of things that the US can do in terms of sanctions, in terms of negotiations, in terms of diplomacy. It's my understanding that this has been brought up to the State Department, to the US ambassador. Secretary Blinken has mentioned this, I'm told, during a visit to Nigeria. I'm also told that the US government is saying that they have faith in the Nigerian court system. And I have no idea how they can make that statement and what factual basis they have in that. When you have someone that absolutely did not commit a crime being held without a hearing and without a trial for 8 months, without the ability to really connect with his legal team, someone that is now facing some serious medical issues, and it's going on 8 months. So my view personally is the US government needs to step up and step up now. Please, everybody that is going to listen to this and see this, please, write to Congress, write to the State Department, write to Secretary Blinken and Ambassador Hill, the US ambassador, and really, really continue to talk about it, to focus on it, and to send the message that we need to bring Tigran home.
If you could speak to the Nigerian government, what message would you send them?
I would ask the Nigerian government to do what is right, what is legal, what is just and release him. Deal with Binance, the company, if you have issues with Binance, but don't hold Tigran hostage in your demands to get money from the company.
We hope that Tigran will somehow maybe hear this interview or see it. If you could say something to Tigran, what would you tell him?
So I hope that Tigran is watching this from his couch in his living room at home, surrounded by his wife and children and friends, and not watching this in Nigeria, to be honest with you. I want Tigran to understand how many people are focused on this, how many people care about this, how many people are trying everything that we can do to fight to get him home. There are a lot of people that love Tigran. There are a lot of people that know that these are trumped up charges, and we will do everything possible to bring him home. We will not forget about Tigran. I think about this case and about Tigran every single day, and I am one of many people that are trying to fight to get him home.
Richard, is there anything else you'd like to share for the audience?
Yeah, so just a couple of things. So recently, I was told by someone that visited Tigran not too long ago in Nigeria, and Tigran wanted to send me a message that he very much appreciates everything that we are doing for him to raise awareness, to fight for him, to keep the focus on him, and to not forget that he is there. And he is so appreciative of what we're doing, and moved and grateful. That was from Tigran. And that message has only caused me to want to fight more to bring him home, and to do everything that we can to convince the US government to do more to fight to get Tigran home. The other thing that I was going to mention is not long ago, I was speaking at a conference. It was a conference hosted by the Coalition Against Financial Crime. And at the end of my talk, and I talked a lot about Tigran and what was happening in his case, they presented an award for Tigran for being the crime fighter, the financial crime fighter of the year. I am holding that award. I look at that award every single day in my office, and I am looking forward to handing that award to Tigran, and thanking him on behalf of the entire financial crime community, which is a significant community, and really tell him how much we appreciate everything that he has done to fight financial crime.
Another agent who worked under Richard Weber at IRS-CI was Matt Price. Matt worked cases with Tigran Gambaryan, and they became fast friends. They formed a bond that extended into their departure from the public sector when both joined the effort to help tackle compliance issues at Binance. Matt had left the company by the time Tigran was arrested in Nigeria. He offered details into their time working together, and he was able to shed light on what sort of man Tigran is and how he influenced many other agents and investigators. How did you first get to know Tigran?
So I met Tigran when I returned to IRS-CI. I was assigned to the cybercrimes unit. It's been a while since I've been in the agency, and he's actually the first agent I met. Kind of hit it off with him right away. He's a funny, kind of goofy guy. Like I had an instant connection. Kind of, we were able to tell each other jokes, make each other laugh, things like that. And as we got to be friends, working together on cases, traveling together, lots of good times, lots of adventures together.
And then how did you all collaborate on actual cases?
The unit that we were in, the DC Cybercrimes Unit, was a real tight knit group of special agents. We kind of traveled extensively together on casework. We supported each other's investigations. One of the first cases that I started working with him on, I had just got in the unit. He needed someone to go do a very sensitive interview with someone in the crypto industry in New York. I just met this guy the day before. I jump on a train. I don't know what to expect, and by the end of the day, we're hanging out like we were best friends. Um, it was a very tight kind of knit unit. We all supported each other. We worked together very extensively, and we helped each other out a lot with our cases globally.
So, how did he impact you?
I mean, a couple of ways. There's the personal way, of course, being a good friend, just a guy that I consider a good buddy of mine that I had a good time with, got to have a lot of good adventures, talk about our families, personal lives, personal issues, things like that. In a professional manner, I mean, he's known as the OG, the original crypto investigator, really, in federal law enforcement. And I learned a lot of technical skills from him. I learned a lot of kind of how to take this, what to me at the time was kind of new nebulous technology, leverage it, and be able to use it investigatively and work some really great cases out of it. So, very much a personal and professional relationship.
You mentioned you all had adventures together. What type of adventures?
I mean, everything from you know travel mishaps, going to places in Europe, or a great example I like to tell is I was the lead investigator on the Bitcoin Fog investigation. I got a very last minute tip that the administrator of Bitcoin Fog was coming to the U.S. to L.A. I live in the Washington D.C. area, so I knew that would mean an overnight last second flight to L.A. and I needed an agent to help. This was during COVID at the time. A lot of field offices weren't really well staffed. I said, let me call Tigran and see what he's doing. Tigran at the time was living in Fresno, California, which is like 4 or 5 hours away from LA. And I think this is really indicative of the type of agent and in person Tigran is. I didn't even finish telling him about the alert. He says, "Yeah, I'll be there." And he's, kind of my guy on the ground. I haven't been to LA operationally before, only on vacation. So he's helping me make contacts with the local IRS, local HSI, local FBI agents. And he stayed up with me all night. We waited for the Bitcoin Fog admin, Roman Sterlingoff, to arrive from Moscow. Shows up at like 1 in the morning. He goes through customs, and then Tigran and I driving him from LAX airport down to Santa Ana, California for his detention. And I'll never forget, the admin was very hungry because he had been on an overnight flight, and the only thing open was a Jack in the Box. And Tigran, myself, and Roman Sterlingoff sitting in the back of a government car while he eats a meal from Jack in the Box before we take him to jail. And that's just kind of indicative of some of the crazy type adventures. But I think the more important part is really a reflection on his personality. Like, not everyone is willing to take that call and say, I don't care what time it is, I'm going to drive, 4 or 5 hours away from my family on a weekend and be there to help my colleague out.
So that's him as a person, as a colleague. What about his skills as an agent? How did his work as an agent impact the cases?
I mean, again, he's one of the first agents that really figured out how to trace Bitcoin in a manner that could be used in a criminal investigation. So he was the case agent on the Sean Bridges and Carl Force case, the Silk Road corruption. And at the time, there was kind of a belief, perhaps amongst the folks in that case that were charged, that crypto wasn't necessarily traceable. It hadn't really been done, and it certainly hadn't been really used in a prosecution yet. So he, being a curious, trained forensic accountant, was able to pick up patterns in the blockchain and trace a lot of the transactions manually. So as that happened, that being kind of the first case, it really set the stage for a lot of the future investigations. As commercial software came out, Tigran was kind of one of the first users of any of these tools. He, influenced the design of some of them, helped train really most of us in IRS-CI as well as other agencies, and somehow by either force of personality or just the fact that he's Tigran and everybody knows him, somehow was involved in almost every investigation in some way or another. Whether it's he got a lead from someone in the industry, or through a relationship he had with a foreign law enforcement authority, or even he just happened to be messing around on the internet or in a crypto forum and he found something interesting. So he really kind of served as really the glue, the connective tissue between a lot of the historic crypto cases, and especially the ones that IRS-CI worked.
Hmm. Matt, you and Tigran both left government and would join Binance. What was happening with Binance at the time, and what was that transition like for Tigran?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, again, I don't think it's a secret now after recent news articles, and of course the criminal case against CZ and the company, Binance had some compliance challenges, and at the time in 2021, we're looking to bring in experts with compliance backgrounds, investigation backgrounds, things of that nature. So Tigran and I both joined on the same day in September of 2021. We were brought in to build out an investigations team, hire staff, develop tools, develop policies, things of that nature, to help Binance do a better job of reducing risk, protecting their customer base, and fulfill its compliance obligations. As far as transition for Tigran, I mean, it was a somewhat of a natural fit. He had the very strong crypto investigative background, and he really had that kind of experience in the industry. And I think we both jumped in and kind of hit the ground running. I mean, the first week, certainly going from a law enforcement world to a private sector job with no transition, I think for both of us was quite a shock, but also a good opportunity to kind of leverage our skills and build things from the ground up.
So, Matt, how did you learn about Tigran's arrest?
Yeah, so I knew he was going to Nigeria. Kind of a running joke we always had with he and my colleagues at Binance is that's the one place I'd never go. And just given some of my experience as a special agent and working investigations, involving Nigerian subjects or corruption. So there was kind of a source of lighthearted humor. I may have even kind of made a joke to him. So I was in Lisbon, Portugal. I was actually in the airport. I was on vacation with my wife, and I opened my phone and I had a LinkedIn message from a reporter asking me to confirm that Tigran was in jail, and that was the shock of a lifetime. So I was very surprised to hear that. I had known he was there. I actually had a missed call from him the day before. I don't know if it was related or not. And then very quickly I went from shock to kind of panic. Reaching out to everyone I knew to try to figure out what was going on. And once I kind of learned initially what was going on, I had heard he'd been moved to a safe house. I thought, okay, this is probably just a misunderstanding. Hopefully in a couple of days this will be resolved, and he'll be back home with his family.
Tell me about how your former colleagues reacted.
So it was a sense of shock, really. Amongst my former law enforcement colleagues, it was a belief of, well, how of all people could Tigran be in this situation? Particularly given what his background is. I mean, almost the irony: a special agent, former special agent who spent his time investigating crypto crime, is now being detained in a foreign jurisdiction, allegedly involved in according to their government, some money laundering related to cryptocurrency. So I think that was really the shock factor. And then it quickly turned to concern, like just for his personal well-being. I mean, again, he's a well-known, well-liked figure in the community, and I think a lot of it was just I can't imagine how difficult this is for him, but as well, he's a father. He has kids close in age to mine. Just imagining what his family's going through, and I think that's been the overriding concern really during this entire ordeal is both him, his personal well-being, and his family.
Hmm. Have you been able to be in touch with his family, with his wife Yuki, over the past few months?
Yeah, some. I mean, again, I let a lot of the family kind of respect their privacy and do what they need to do. Recognizing that this is a difficult situation. But yeah, there are plenty of us that where we can try to help out and make sure we're in communication with the family.
Based on what you know about Tigran, how do you think he's endured these past several months?
I think he's physically struggling very much. He has some pretty severe back issues. I know he's suffering from herniated discs. I know he's got issues, mobility issues. He's having a hard time walking due to numbness and pain in his hip and his leg. He's also had bouts of malaria, lung infections. So from the physical side, I think he's really been having a tough time. Um, you know, One of the things with Tigran is he's a very strong-willed individual. And I think he's done the best he can in the circumstances to maintain that composure, maintain that um, you know strong fortitude. I will say when I saw the video recently of him leaving the courtroom and the guards refusing to provide him assistance, and he was clearly in distress, having a difficult time walking. That was quite shocking and very distressing. And I think myself and many of my colleagues were really kind of taken aback by seeing that.
As someone who works in crypto, how has this situation impacted how you think about the industry in Nigeria?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very somewhat sobering situation where, in an instance where a representative of a company who is not the CEO, really doesn't have any kind of leadership potential at all, is just an employee, is brought to a jurisdiction or comes at the invitation of a government to have ostensible business meetings, to discuss issues, to try to work collaboratively with a regulator or with a government, and the government decides they don't like what he has to say, or they have an issue with his employer, and then make him the fall guy for it. He's now detained. I think that really sends a very kind of chilling message across the industry that I have to imagine other companies that consider doing business in Nigeria see this incident and either decide that it's just not worth the risks, or that it's a jurisdiction where you can't have that kind of collaborative relationship with government that you can in other jurisdictions. And I also think it negatively affects the consumer market in Nigeria, right? Businesses, crypto businesses are going to be afraid to do business there based on this incident, which makes it difficult for what clearly was a pretty large consumer base and a very hungry market for adoption of crypto.
I know his story has reached many in the US government. There have been efforts to try to respond to this issue. What's your take on what the government has done or maybe could do?
I think it took the government a bit to kind of become more engaged, and I recognize there's complications with foreign affairs, and I really commend particularly some of the efforts in Congress. Two congressmen visited Tigran in jail. There's been resolutions on the Hill calling for his release, and I really commend that. It's my understanding that there is work going on at the highest levels of the executive branch, and recognizing these things take time. In an ideal world, obviously, anything the U.S. government can do to bring him home as soon as possible is what I think myself and really anyone else paying attention to this wants to see happen. I know there's been talk of potentially designating him as a detainee under the Levinson Act. I as a citizen, as a taxpayer, anything the government can do to really bring the situation to a close and bring him home. I mean, I look at this as beyond the fact that he served his country for over a decade in law enforcement, is responsible for some of the most impactful crypto investigations that have ever occurred. He's also a citizen and a taxpayer and a family man. He's got two kids at home and a wife. Like, looking at that from that perspective, the more that can be done to bring him home as soon as possible.
Matt, if you had the opportunity to talk to the Nigerian government about his situation, what message would you send them?
I think if Nigeria has issues with a company, they should deal with those issues directly. Holding an employee who has no decision making authority is completely out of bounds, and frankly, to me as a layperson, seems pretty counterproductive. I struggle to understand the motivation and kind of the end goal behind this detention. It certainly seems to me, as a casual observer, to be a bit arbitrary, and almost counterproductive to the end goal. So, I mean, my ask would be, whether you have a legitimate issue with his employer or not, Tigran is not a part of that. Release Tigran, allow him to come home, allow him to get the medical treatment he needs, and you can still pursue, the allegations that you're pursuing through lawful means in your country. But Tigran has nothing to do with this. Send him home.
What do you think is the end goal here on the Nigeria side?
I don't know. I really don't. I don't have enough understanding of what the goal is. I mean, I've tried to keep track of some of the court hearings. It doesn't seem to be much progress on the legal side, so I really struggle to understand what the end goal is.
Yeah, I think we're all trying to figure that out. With this show, we're hoping that at some point Tigran will get word of it, will be able to hear it. If you could speak to Tigran, if he was, if he's able to listen to this somehow, what would you say to him?
I mean, I tell him stay strong. I know it's difficult. You're in a tough spot. Stay strong. You got a lot of people back here rooting for you, pulling for you, doing what they can to raise awareness, to push those in power to do what can be done from a legal standpoint, from a executive branch, legislative branch standpoint. I've attended part of my role. I attend lots of different crypto conferences, and every time Tigran is the subject of discussion. So the industry is certainly paying attention to Tigran. They're doing what they can. The government is certainly paying attention, and just stay strong. And we really want him home as soon as possible and back home with his family.
Matt, you share the same background professionally as Tigran. So, how does all this make you feel for the work that you're doing?
It's a little bit inspires some nervousness, to be honest. I travel quite a bit, probably even more places than Tigran has, both professionally and personally. I always thought that if something were to happen, the cavalry's there, the Team America, they'll come help you out. And I think I've learned a lot since this incident, kind of what that actually means. I can relate a story. I was in a former Soviet republic a few months ago for work. Very different circumstances. I was a guest of the government doing some training, but there was civil unrest going on at the time. And I remember sitting in my hotel room watching this occur on the street in front of my hotel. And the first thing that popped in my head is Tigran's situation, because at the time, this was early on in his detention. And I just had that kind of pit in my feeling, like, what would happen to me? Would I have access to diplomatic help or consular support? Like, would the government be able to help me out? Again, different circumstances, but I think this incident kind of really made me, one, appreciate, being an American citizen, obviously, and all the benefits that come with it, but also, thinking twice a little bit about, well, where do I travel? And, are there certain places that I could be, arbitrarily detained or, harassed just because of what I do for a living or what I used to do?
Yeah, I think that's why a lot of us we see ourselves in Tigran in his situation, especially those of us who worked for the government, worked in law enforcement, or even in national security. His situation really hits home. So, Matt, what should the average just crypto investor know about the relevance of Tigran?
I think what's probably not really known is Tigran and our colleagues really kind of help bring trust and transparency to crypto. When it first came out, over a decade ago, I think there was a belief that it was a niche technology for hobbyists, and clearly some of the criminal element took advantage of it early with darknet markets like Silk Road and Alphabay. But when you look back at a lot of the investigative work that Tigran worked on, the investigations, the ability to trace transactions, the methodology used by law enforcement to do this type of work, and the cases that have been brought, I think it really has pushed the industry into a place where it's much more transparent, brought more trust, and it really has helped promote kind of the licit uses of crypto. You see a massive growth in retail adoption, institutional adoption. You see players in the TradFi space that a few years ago no one would expect that are now launching, crypto ETFs and crypto trading platforms within in their larger customer base. So I think it's probably not known to the average user, but a lot of the work that Tigran did, both as a special agent and later as a compliance officer, really kind of helped enable a lot of this growth.
Winston and Strawn is an international law firm that for more than 170 years has served as a trusted advisor and advocate for clients across virtually every industry. Winston and Strawn's law practice, made up of more than 950 attorneys across 15 global offices, is built on the talent, creativity, and determination of its lawyers and an unwavering commitment to its clients. Winston and Strawn boasts an exceptional financial crimes compliance practice comprised of attorneys who have decades of experience assisting clients with Bank Secrecy Act and anti-money laundering compliance counseling, state and federal enforcement matters, and related investigations. Learn more about the firm's capabilities at winston.com. At a time when financial crime affects not only businesses but lives, it's crucial to have tools that simplify complexity. Chainalysis provides the technology and services that help governments, financial institutions, and crypto companies trace the movement of digital assets and uncover illicit activity. Whether it's helping to ensure compliance or tracking down those who abuse the system, Chainalysis is trusted by leaders in the fight against crypto related crime. As we confront the human toll behind these crimes, it's clear that the work to ensure transparency and justice in digital finance has never been more urgent. To learn more, visit chainalysis.com/designated. Hummingbird is a compliance platform that's reimagining what's possible from financial crime investigations. Teams using Hummingbird work more efficiently and effectively without compromising on quality. Investigators quickly get to the heart of each case with information at their fingertips and compliance grade automation and AI to boost productivity. Designed for essential work in anti money laundering, anti fraud, customer due diligence, and more, Hummingbird allows you to customize the platform to your policies, giving you exactly what you need to get the job done. Hummingbird is determined to fight financial crime by empowering those on the front lines, because financial crime never stops evolving, and neither should the tools you use to stop it. Learn more at hummingbird.co. That's hummingbird.co. A few words about one of our sponsors, the Crypto Council for Innovation. The Crypto Council for Innovation is shaping global crypto policy and working with leaders in the US, EU, UK, and Asia. We collaborate directly with security professionals, law enforcement, and government leaders to keep them ahead of the rapidly changing crypto landscape. Our tailored workshops and learning programs provide national security personnel with the latest insights into what's coming next, helping them build connections with industry experts and fellow officials. Head to cryptoforinnovation.org to get in touch and join our next workshop. After his decade-long stint in public service at the IRS-CI, Tigran Gambaryan joined the private sector to work at Binance, the largest cryptocurrency exchange in the world. He's the head of financial crime compliance, which is why he made his way to Nigeria in February of this year in an effort to resolve existing issues between his company and the country's government. Of course, Tigran remains in Nigeria under unjust circumstances to this day. So, how is Binance assisting in the effort to bring Tigran home? Noah Perlman is the Chief Compliance Officer for Binance, and he offered some insight. Why don't we start with Tigran and Binance? Can you tell us why did Binance hire Tigran?
Sure. So Tigran Gambaryan actually predates my arrival at Binance. And actually, it's one of the reasons that I'll come to it in a second, but the fact that he was working at Binance was one of the reasons that gave me confidence to actually join Binance, that Binance was a company committed to doing the right thing in the financial crime space. And so let me give you a little background. Tigran Gambaryan, former IRS criminal investigation federal agent, actually sort of legendary in sort of the crypto investigative world. There's actually a book written by Andy Greenberg, Tracers in the Dark. Tigran is featured heavily in there, and he's involved in some of the most important crypto cases to date, including sort of the corrupt agent involved in Silk Road and many other cases. And so when Binance, we call it internally Binance 2.0, when Binance sort of turned the page and decided to get really serious about compliance and financial crime compliance in particular, they made a number of investments in personnel and talent, and a hire such as Tigran Gambaryan was part of that investment and part of that sort of turning the page. So we brought him here. Again, I say that it was before my time, but to run financial crime compliance. And that's the job he had and currently has.
Well, tell us about the impact that Tigran has had at Binance before this detention.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just monumental impact. So first of all, in terms of just his knowledge and his ability to recruit talent, he sort of operated almost as a force multiplier. Once somebody like Tigran with his reputation joins a firm, it's a signal to the market that, hey, this is a serious place. So in addition to giving like me confidence and others, he recruited a lot of former federal agents as well to really beef up our program. And then his connections in law enforcement, and I would probably say there's sort of two, I mean, probably lots of things, but two principal buckets of work that were particularly impactful, that are particularly impactful. So one was just his technical ability to sort of analyze and investigate and sort of train the folks so that we really sort of had a robust program, best in class program in terms of detecting wrongdoing around the world. And then second, his relationships with law enforcement, again, globally, enabled us to sort of work collaboratively but also to push back where appropriate. Law enforcement, at very skill levels, crypto is sort of, it's an emerging technology. The investigations can be challenging. And just because we get a request from law enforcement to seize funds doesn't necessarily mean that the request is perfect on its face. But having somebody like Tigran who has the trust of law enforcement, it enabled him to I don't even want to say push back, but to work collaboratively with law enforcement to make sure that innocent users were not negatively impacted, and that we can do the right thing both by law enforcement, by regulators, and importantly, our users as well.
So, could you tell us a little bit more about what that would consist of in terms of Tigran going to another country, Nigeria or otherwise? What would he be doing in relation to law enforcement locally?
Part of what he was doing, him and his team, would be training law enforcement, keeping dialogues open, and also working with regulators and governments as well, both to educate, keep communication open to make sure that we're all sort of aligned in where we want to go with crypto.
No, I'm going to back up a little bit with this next question because I realize some people may actually not know. Could you describe for us exactly what is Binance?
Yeah. So, look, in the simplest terms, Binance is a crypto exchange. We offer a number of products and a number of services, but at its heart, Binance is an exchange where people can come to buy, sell, and store their crypto. We are the world's largest exchange by volume, operating in over 100 countries. We are also the most regulated exchange in the world, having 19 different licenses and registrations throughout the world. So that's what Binance is.
So there's the idea that there was a Binance 2.0, which Tigran was a part of. Could you describe for us what was, I guess, Binance 1.0?
Sure. So, I mean, look, we use that term internally, but Binance's history, we're 7 years old. When Binance started 7 years ago as an exchange, it was founded by crypto enthusiasts, technical experts, traders. It really was not focused on compliance. Not that that's an excuse, but that just happens to be how it started. And very quickly, Binance became almost a victim of its own success. It grew exponentially. I think within 6 months, became profitable. Look, we're right now at over 220 million users. So this speed, I don't want to say unprecedented, but it's pretty dramatic. But as a result, in the early days, compliance just was not a focus. And at a certain point, the founders realized they did need to get serious about compliance. And this is what we refer to internally as Binance 2.0, a sort of a turning the page. And look, I don't want to gloss over the fact, we have paid for our mistakes. Our original founder, CZ, stepped down as part of a resolution that we reached last year with the US government. We paid substantial fines, but while that was very painful, we're very much focused on the future, on being a fully compliant, regulated, registered exchange, and serving our users across the world.
So before we even get into Tigran in Nigeria and the arrest, can you tell us more about Binance's history in Nigeria in general? What was happening before this past February in terms of Nigeria and Binance?
Sure. So we had a history of working in Nigeria and actually working with Nigerian law enforcement. I took a look at the stats, and I think between 22 and 23, I think we may have, don't hold me to the exact number, but over 600 law enforcement requests from the Nigerian government in which we assisted, responding to the equivalent of subpoenas, helping freeze assets. So we had sort of a long history of working collaboratively with the Nigerian government and in Nigeria. It's an important market. At a certain point, I believe in 2022, there started to be, as throughout the world, sort of emerging regulation and emerging desire to have crypto companies register. And we engaged proactively, or tried to engage, I should say, proactively with the Nigerian government to make sure that we were not running afoul of any regulations or emerging regulations. And those communications were somewhat stop and start. We didn't really get a lot of traction there. But at a certain point, and this is what ultimately led to his visit, at a certain point, there was a desire to have sort of sit down communications with the Nigerian government to sign a memorandum of understanding and to really to move the relationship forward in a more regulated way. That was what led him to come to Nigeria, to go to Nigeria, I should say, to attend a couple of hearings. To be very clear, this was at the Nigerian government's invitation, and it is something that obviously that's why he went.
Can you describe for us what happened with Tigran in Nigeria at the beginning of this year?
So there were a couple visits. So again, at the Nigerian government's invitation, Tigran, these were conversations that began sort of into November, December of 2023, for ultimately a meeting that was set, an initial meeting that was set in January of 2024. Tigran came to that meeting. There was some back and forth. Ultimately, he left that meeting with no resolution. There were some indications during that time that there may have been, I don't want to say hostilities, but that the meeting was less collaborative than one would expect, given that we were invited there. And there were allegations raised at that time that Binance may have had some historical violations of Nigerian laws. One thing that should be very clear is, as part of Binance 2.0, we are very much of the view that if we have made historic mistakes and there's evidence of that, we are interested in resolving them. We've demonstrated that with the United States and with other countries around the world. And so when Nigeria indicated that there may have been violations of their rules and their laws, this is something we wanted to engage with them. We didn't just want to take their word for it, but on the other hand, if there's evidence that we may have violated something, that's something we wanted to engage with and resolve. Tigran, as part of a subsequent meeting that occurred in February of this year, Tigran was invited back to Nigeria again to participate in some meetings to discuss both collaboration and also to answer potential allegations of wrongdoing in the past. It was at the conclusion of one of these meetings in which the Nigerian government detained him and said he wasn't free to leave. That's over 200 days ago. He has been detained in Nigeria.
What were they saying that they were upset about?
So Binance and Tigran were both charged with two different charges. One was tax evasion and one was money laundering. I believe the tax evasion charge against Tigran has subsequently been dropped. But so there's sort of two buckets of criminal charges. I mean, to me, to us as a company, what's unfathomable is the fact that Tigran, who, as important as he is to our program, let's be honest, he's a mid-level employee. He's not an officer of the company. He doesn't exercise decision-making power in any meaningful way over the direction of the company, tax policy. To detain him is completely unwarranted and unnecessary. And one of the things that what I've continued to try and articulate is that we have a track record of resolving. We will resolve. They don't need to hold Tigran as a ransom, as leverage, as a bargaining chip in order to get us to the table. We want to talk. If there's evidence of wrongdoing, let's see it. Let's talk about it and let's resolve it. But we've yet to see that.
So getting to the detention, exactly how did you find out and what happened when they arrested him?
It's actually, I mean, just reliving it is pretty painful. So prior to his detention, I was in real-time communication with him. We were in real-time communication with him. I was asking how the hearings were going. And at a certain point, actually the morning session, he reported back went pretty positively. At some point in the afternoon, I received message that things had taken a more adversarial turn. At a certain point, I did get a message from him to call the embassy. He reported that he looked like he was being detained. So that happened in real time. And obviously, as you can imagine, we sort of went into overdrive trying to figure out exactly what happened, where he was, how to get in communication, et cetera, notifying the embassy. And again, that's some 200 odd days ago.
Are you able to communicate with him in his situation?
We can communicate through him through official channels. He does, we do have lawyers. It's not real time, obviously, and it's not, it's not ideal, but we do from time to time are able to communicate to get messages from him, through those channels.
And what has been the communication like with Nigerian officials, and how constant is it?
Look, I can't really get into sort of the details of that on a specific level. What I can say is that the two messages, the two sort of overarching messages that we continue to sort of push publicly, privately, is one, we're committed to resolving. So let's get to the table and talk and figure out how we can resolve. And of course, two, and more importantly, is you got to let Tigran out. He does, he serves no purpose. He's a mid-level guy, and this is really sort of the inequities here are really tremendous by holding him.
How have other employees responded?
On a personal level, it's the most challenging experience I've ever had as a manager or as a colleague, to have a good friend, well-respected colleague detained unjustly like this. Weighs on me, and I know it weighs on the entire company in a meaningful way. There is definitely a feeling of, as you can imagine, helplessness. I mean, there's little we can actually do as employees other than sort of, keep our focus on this and work as hard as we can. To sort of keep him in the news and to keep the pressure on and to keep the dialogue open with Nigeria, so we can get to some resolution here.
What about the broader crypto community? What sort of message would you like to send to the crypto community about Tigran's situation?
So just keeping keeping him front and center. I mean, look, it's on a practical level. It unfortunately serves as sort of a wake up call and a warning to crypto executives. I mean, not just crypto, really any executive, but certainly crypto executives, that this is a possibility. And certainly anybody traveling to a jurisdiction which may be adverse to crypto ought to make sure that they're being very thoughtful about that, and that the security, that they've thought through that. One of the messages that we got, that I received from Tigran early on, was a desire not to be forgotten. He communicated, he's sitting there in prison. He knows life goes on, and his sort of admonition was, don't forget about me. And it's one of the reasons why it is a standing agenda item at every meeting I run. The first bullet point is update on Tigran, even if I don't have one, because I think it's important that we don't lose that muscle memory, that our colleague is sitting in Kuja prison in Nigeria while life goes on. And so I guess my plea to the rest of the crypto community is the same, is to continue to talk about this, to publicize it, to think about it. And the crypto community has rallied. There's been a tremendous amount of support. Tigran is as I said before, incredibly respected in the law enforcement community, in the crypto community. So there's no shortage of people who are rallying around the cause. And I'm personally, and Binance is, as a company, grateful for that support.
Noah, is there anything else that you'd like to convey about Tigran's situation?
It's heartbreaking for him. He's incredibly strong. Some of the message we get back, even some of his humor still comes through, which is just remarkable. But this is taking a terrible toll on him, on his family. And I'm grateful for you giving me the opportunity to talk about it, and for you guys exploring his case. It's really important, and we're appreciative.
Tigran Gambaryan's imprisonment is simply heartbreaking. As noted so painfully by Tigran's wife Yuki, what happened to him could happen to any of us. The greed of corruption doesn't care who it ensnares. Tigran's detention is a cautionary tale to those who are fighting financial crime. It's my hope that by sharing his story, We can build pressure within the United States and in Nigeria to get him released. Please share these episodes with your circle so that we can make sure Tigran isn't forgotten. We must bring Tigran home. I'm Yaya Jata Fanusie. This is Designated on the Illicit Edge Network.